Started out on a one-way train, always knew where I was gonna go next. Didn't know until
Welcome to Pull and Perseverance, and thank you for joining me. My next guest is Professor Antonia Wadley, a physiologist turned coach, a bold renegade, and a passionate advocate for empowerment, self-reflection, and self-development. She reminded me of the quote by Jim Rohn, who said, and I quote, "Work harder on yourself than you do on your job," unquote. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Tony. Welcome to Pull and Perseverance, and thank you so much for being here. And I'm really excited to have you as our guest. Just some brief introductions, please, before we kick off.
Thanks, Benny. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I'm Tony Wadley. I have been an academic at WITS for quite some time, but in the last few years, I've learnt coaching and I've been transitioning actually into that more full-time. So I'm an honorary prof in physiology, but actually my role now is coaching in higher education.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited. And the reason why I really wanted to speak to a coach, as I mentioned to you earlier, I just find as pharmacists in the pharmacy profession, from my experience, that they don't reach out to coaches very often for assistance. So, I mean, my first question is, in your definition, what is a coach? How would you describe it?
Well, I mean, maybe before I can answer that question, just to respond to that idea of pharmacists not reaching out for coaching. It's funny, I think coaching is so commonplace in corporate. Everybody's got a coach. There are coaches everywhere, and it's a known thing. Whereas in academia and kind of clinically, I don't think coaching is so well known. And so, yes, I've seen that throughout academia and other healthcare professions as well. So, yeah, I don't think that's a novel to pharmacists in particular. But coaching is this really special space that it's a thinking space. It's a space where there is time just for you with somebody who is non-judgmental. There's no hierarchy. It's not like they know better than you about anything. And you can think about whatever it is that's important to you. So it might be where you want to go in life. It might be about, just being really intentional about what it is that you're doing, where you're going and how you're doing it, and building self-awareness. There's lots more to say, but
the tip of the iceberg. So really just introspecting, getting to know yourself a little bit better, I would imagine, as well. Okay, I'm sure you're going to describe it much more in detail as we go. In terms of how does it work? I mean, what would a typical session entail if you had to book a session with a coach?
I mean, typically, one doesn't have just one session, like you might go to the GP for. So often you might have a program, a series of sessions with a coach. That might be 6 sessions or 12 sessions, for example. And you'd often go with something that you wanted to work on. And that's often a pain point in your life. Sometimes it can be something like, I want to step up into leadership, for example. But often it's oh my gosh, there's this conflict going on, or I'm feeling so burnt out, or I'm totally stuck, or I'm totally overwhelmed, something like that. And I want to feel better about it. So kind of the overview of a program would be kind of thinking about that particular issue and kind of coming at it from lots of different angles. But in a single session, you would come and and the sessions are directed by the person having coaching, the coachee. So you'd come and go, I want to talk about this today. You see, that situation happened again this week. Let's talk about it. And the coach will ask, okay, cool. What do you want to get out of the session? And so again, the coach is directed to, well, what do you want? What do you want to be different by the end? The coach doesn't tell you that. You have to decide that for yourself. And then together you will explore it from lots of different angles. You'll, kind of get into it in ways that the issue in ways that you haven't seen before, and shed new light on things and help you with new thinking. And then a way forward.
So from what I'm hearing, it's just different perspective from another individual that potentially you didn't think of certain areas because you're so close to the situation. You just need another set of eyes almost.
Yes.
That's interesting. So how would that differ from a therapy session or speaking to a mentor or speaking to a counseling session, for example? How is it different?
Yeah. And that's a really good and important question. So I'm glad you asked it. So with mentoring, first of all, I often think of mentoring as, wisdom being passed down a concentration gradient. So you go and you find somebody who's wiser than you and older than you, who's been there before, and a mentor will listen to you, and they will often advise you and give you suggestions, from their point of view and their experience. Oh, Benny, you need to go and do this and this. Speak to that person, do this, do that. That's what I'd suggest for you. Therapy, on the other hand, if you were struggling with something, a therapist will go and work with you on trauma. So I often say that a therapist will stand with you in the present and look into the past. And will help you understand what happened there, unpack it, and give you support for those really painful moments in life. Whereas a coach will stand with you in the present and look to the future. So if we go, yes, life has happened, where do you want to be going? And will help kind of guide you in that future direction.
Okay, so the depth of consulting or discussions would happen briefly about the past, but the focus would be more on the future, if what I'm hearing is...
Yeah. So I guess, and great follow-up. So I guess the difference would be that the coach might look to the past just to see, like, what are the patterns? Where else has this shown up in your life before? But it doesn't get into trauma. If you need support for trauma, then counselling and therapy is absolutely the way to go. And sometimes it can be a bit of a fine line. So, don't worry about it. You can always go and, go to a coach. And if they find like, oh, hang on a second, we're standing on a painful trauma here, they will refer you to to a therapist. Sometimes that means that coaching can stop whilst you do that. Sometimes they can go along in parallel, and it can be beautiful that in some instances that you kind of have that trauma support and you're weaving into, and how am I going to be different in life at the same time? So it depends on the person and the situation, whether they happen in series or in parallel.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great explanation. So my experience has been, there's been various coaches. You get life coaches, you get sports coaches, you get food coaches. So what is the difference?
Yes.
How do I know who I need to seek? I think that would be a challenge as well.
Yes.
If somebody's
oh my
new
gosh.
to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, coaching is such an unfortunate term because it covers so much, and it's not surprising that there's confusion around it. And I think often when people haven't come across coaching before, that's where their mind goes to, is kind of sports coaches, somebody who's kind of going to give you a program and tell you what to do. And there are coaches like, business coaches who will tell you what to do and so on. But there's this new and emerging field of this other kind of coaching, which is also called coaching, where where you're encouraged to discover yourself and so on. So and your question was around, gosh, how do I know what I need? And so that is a tricky one. But I think, you'll come into contact with coaches who are either in your field or who are talking about self-discovery and building self-awareness. It might be that there are mindset coaches, and if you realize, oh my gosh, my mindset's not right, then that's great. You can go and see somebody who calls themselves a mindset coach. But I think it's kind of just coming into contact with the different coaches out there, and getting a feel for what you resonate with. If
you have to be, sorry, and Tony, you have to be very clear on which direction you want to head. So you can't go into choosing a coach blindly, I would imagine. You'd have to do your research almost before you find somebody that aligns with what your needs are. Because it really is a tough space to find somebody that really, who you can get the answers from, or assist you, should I say, in finding those answers.
And I think actually part of that homework process is when you kind of come into contact with somebody, either via a podcast or what they're writing, or you bump into them or so on, is to have a call with them. So just about every coach will invite you to have it's either a coffee conversation or a chemistry conversation or a discovery call, but they all mean the same thing. It means a 20-30-minute chat where you can just talk and see, where are you in life? What is it that they do? And see how you resonate. And it's funny, there was a paper that came out some time ago looking at what makes a successful coach. And they looked at all the different tools and techniques out there, and they were trying to find the most successful one. And they found that it came down to one thing. And that one thing was the chemistry between the two people. If there's a rapport, it will be successful.
Absolutely.
And having one of those chemistry conversations with more than one person is nice, because then you can compare it, like, oh, actually, I really felt something with that person.
Absolutely. I think to be vulnerable with somebody, you have to have that chemistry.
Yes.
It's really important.
Yeah.
So why should I invest in a coach, Tony? Because I think personally it's an expensive exercise, and we spoke about this often. Why should I invest? What am I expecting to get out of it?
So, it can be an expensive exercise. And I guess that's one of the other things about the range of coaching, is that there is a range of costs to this that can be very, very broad. From my point of view, it's an investment in yourself. I think what's really important is that coaching doesn't need to go on forever. So a sign of a good coaching program and a good coach is not dependency on the coach. It is not that this thing needs to go on for years and years and years. In fact, I see that as a real red flag. I've been seeing this coach for X number of years, and that's not how coaching is supposed to go. That the whole point is that by the end of your coaching program, let's just say 6 months down the line, you should be able to coach yourself. You should know, what are the questions I need to ask myself in this situation? So a sign of a good coaching program is that you finish and you are able to do or work out what it is that you need to do, and ask yourself the right questions going forward. So yes, it might feel like it's an expense, but it doesn't have to be an expense that goes on and on. And in fact, those questions and those ways of being can serve you, hopefully, throughout your life. From that.
So it's almost as if you expect the coach to give you a toolbox, a toolbox, literally, to be able to assist you through challenges. Because, I think life is full of patterns, and to be able to identify those patterns and how you deal with them.
Yeah.
That would guide you.
Yeah.
What are some of the common misconceptions of coaching, of people who are coaching?
So I think probably the one I hear the most is that oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a moment, is that the coach is going to provide the answers. People often say, oh my gosh, I thought you were going to tell me what to do. And actually, all you did was ask me questions. And I found the most amazing answers, because that's the point, is that the answers are inside you. What is right? You know you better than anybody else. You know what's right for you. And sometimes it's about having the space to remember who you are and get back in touch with your own wisdom for what it is that you need to do in this particular situation.
I love that. That's so important. So it's always going back to yourself, eh? Because you have the answers. You sound like the Wizard of Oz.
Well, and
Dorothy said that.
Yes.
But Dorothy the witch said that, I think.
And finding the wizards within you. And I think we often led to believe, like, actually all the answers, well, that person knows the answers and that book knows the answers. And if I just do that course, I'll find the answers. But actually, what is the wisdom within you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that leads to my next question in terms of how does it benefit me from a personal perspective and from a professional perspective? Because from my experience with coaching, very briefly that I had, luckily with you,
many years ago.
Many years ago. Our discussions were a lot around how there's a balancing act between professional and personal. So it's almost as if you need to get both right in order to succeed in all areas of your life. So, I mean, I'm almost answering my question, but how do you think it benefits you?
And there's a beautiful example of you answering your own question. So I think that, people often come with a work issue. This thing is happening at work and I need to think about this. And when you dig a little bit deeper, often whatever the thing isn't just playing out in the workspace. It'll be playing out in other parts of your life as well. And I think that's the really kind of beautiful, holistic nature of coaching, is like, okay, well, let's get to the source of the issue. Let's go and get it right at its roots. And when you do that, then it plays out in your home spaces and in, the workspace too.
But it centers around awareness, Tony, and that's what it seems like a central theme in our discussion so far, where everything boils down to being aware of everything. It's so tough.
Yeah.
But that's cool, I would think. It's being aware and to be able to identify that whatever issue you're having at work is really something potentially happening at home as well. It's about awareness.
And the way I like to think about it is, if you think the same way, feel the same way, and act the same way, you'll get the same results. And so often when you have a pain point or something, and that's what you come with, the awareness piece comes with, like, what is my pattern here? And it might be about thinking or feeling or acting or all of them. And actually, when you can start seeing that, oh, well, this is my loop. This is the pattern I've been playing up until now. And then together you can think about, well, what's another way that it could look? How else could you show up in these moments? And it's kind of building that competency and capacity within you to see that playing out, and then choosing and upskilling yourself to do something else. And the other thing I could add is that it's almost like, we have those set patterns and those roles that we play. And we play that role wherever we are. And so I think part of coaching can be about seeing, oh my gosh, what role is it that I'm playing here in this situation, and again, designing a new one. And that's not something that a coach can tell you or give you. That needs to come from you. And the coach will help you think about it and support you and come with some ideas.
Thank you. So you mentioned some of the red flags that you would notice in a coach, like somebody who is ongoing, your coach for years.
Yeah.
But what about, is there any other, before you decide to go with a coach, any red flags that you need to maybe look for?
Yes.
Potentially could be hazardous.
I think probably the most important thing is that it's an unregulated profession. So anybody can call themselves a coach, and you can do a 2-week course and call yourself a coach. And so to kind of get around that, I'd suggest that if you're looking for a coach, find somebody who is accredited. So there are a couple of bodies. The big ones are the International Coaching Federation, or the ICF, or in South Africa it's Comensa, which is Coaching and Mentoring South Africa, and they regulate professionals. They make sure they're trained, they make sure that they're keeping up with their CPD, and make sure that there's a quality. So you can just check that somebody is accredited, and that would really, really help. I think you can also ask a coach, what are you working on yourself? Just to check that they've actually, that they've got a growth mindset and they're practicing what they preach. Yes, and then there's the kind of coaching that goes on and on. So yes, you could ask them, what does a coaching program look like? And if there's an end point to it, that's good. And if it goes on too long, not so good. So those are probably the biggest red flags that I can think of.
So I guess you answered my next question on what separates a great coach from a good one. How would you describe that? I think, I don't know, but again, it's a personal thing. Am I right?
It is, but I've got a couple of thoughts on that. And one is kind of how deep the coaching goes. So, I mean, there are coaches, you could say, I really want to think about my 5-year plan. And you could go to a coach and you could think about the 5-year plan, and, you could define success as having the 5-year plan. But actually, I think a great coach would take that deeper, as in, what's been getting in the way of these goals up until now? What haven't you seen about yourself or your potential? What more could you live up to? How aligned are you? And kind of really take it so it is a profound piece of work rather than, just a goal-setting exercise. And the other thing I would add, other than depth, is how powerful the questions are that they ask. So, and I think a powerful question is one it's really short, actually. It's a short question, but it's one that gets into your head a bit like a worm almost, and you kind of, it just sits with you and you come back to it and you think about it some more, and it can really make you think. And that reminds me when I was at the beginning of my coaching journey, and I'd so enjoyed my first course, and I was kind of considering, do I continue with this life of academia and do a bit of coaching in it, or do I leave academia and coach? And I was grappling with this question, and I had been introduced to this this incredible master coach. She still is, in her 80s, coaching flat out. I mean, incredible. And so I wanted to speak to her a little bit about where I could go with this, but I had brought her my dilemma, so do I do this or this? And I was right in my problem. And she goes, Tony, it sounds like you can do either of these things. So the question is, what kind of a life do you want for yourself? And I sat with it, and for months I was kind of thinking around, well, that, God, what kind of a life do I want for myself? And well, here I now am. But I think for me, that was the sign of an incredible coach. Yeah.
Almost like a question that's really triggering, where it triggers all of your senses, which which
Yeah.
is so important. Yeah, because it really must make you think, and it must stick with you. As you said, it takes a while before you get the answer.
Yeah.
But it triggers something. That's great. Oh wow, she sounds amazing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so if you come across a client, or if you're coaching somebody who has a different value system from you, where your beliefs are so different, how do you tackle that as a coach? Because that's inevitable, isn't it? Where you would have differing opinions or something. So how do you tackle that?
Um, from a coaching point of view, that's not a problem at all. I mean, maybe if you were mentoring somebody, it might be very difficult or challenging if they had different values or different goals. But that's not a problem, because as a coach, you put your goals and your values to one side. They're actually not relevant at all in the coaching space. And so it's about the person who's come for coaching. And so what I would do if I was noticing something like that is just get curious about it, and ask more and more questions to really understand, where are you coming from, and tell me the story about that. And what's the history of that particular value for you? So you just work with it. It's not a problem at all.
Okay. So really shouldn't be any conflict if you have differing opinions on something, because it shouldn't really matter. Okay, thank you. So can you share, I mean, you shared a lovely story already on your personal journey, but have you had any like standout stories of somebody you've coached where you've revolutionized their life?
Oh gosh, and actually there are so many lovely stories, and each coachee is so different, and they're such special relationships, all of them. But the one that pops to mind right now was somebody. Actually, we'd been kind of coaching through COVID, and it was a hectic time, and particularly as an academic trying to put everything online and handle everything that was going on. And I just remember at the end of that coaching program, her saying, "It is the end of the year. It is marking season, and I am calm. It's a miracle," she said. And she had tapped into how to care for herself, and how to anchor herself in really turbulent times. And she'd put so much beautiful work into this, and it was really kind of captured in that one particular comment. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like a proud moment for you. In terms of obstacles that people have faced, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time now in terms of coaching. How do people achieve that growth that they're looking for? And what are the obstacles that you found from a growth perspective? I mean, essentially, that's why you approach a coach, I would think. Maybe I'm wrong, is because you want to grow. You want to expand your horizons. You want to challenge yourself to get to another stage, be it personally or in your career. So what are the obstacles you have seen that people face in terms of growth?
Yeah, I think, when people get over the first hurdle, which is kind of coming for coaching in the first place, then often if anything gets in the way, it's either old habits, which have a real draw to them and a familiarity to them, which I guess kind of links with the other thing, which is fear that, stepping out and trying something new can feel really scary. And so that's probably the biggest thing. But I mean, that's the beautiful thing about coaching, is that you've got somebody there to share the triumphs and the moments that things don't work out so well, and the moments that you were brave and the moments you weren't, and to kind of
So how would you help somebody who is feeling overwhelmed or stuck? Oh, I mean, what would be your
Yeah, and that's common.
what you
And
guide them?
yeah, it's almost like they can be slightly different things. So from the overwhelmed point of view, and that, oh yeah, that can be quite common. People kind of coming. It's almost impossible to think when you are overwhelmed. You know, when you are acutely overwhelmed and feeling anxious and so on. And so if somebody arrived at a session like that, I would just spend some time with them, just settling them that you cannot think, you cannot affect any change when when you're in a fight or flight moment, when you've got increased sympathetic nervous system tone. It's nice to be able to say this to a bunch of pharmacists because you know what I'm talking about. That you can't think. And so, can we sort of in that session just settle yourself through breathing, through some kind of a visualization exercise? It depends on the moment, but settle yourself. And actually, once you can bring your rest and digest, your kind of parasympathetic tone back up, then actually you can start to see ways in which you can move forward. How can you get support? What do you need right now? One can think around it, but only once your nervous system is settled. And
sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to say, as for when people are stuck, sometimes that can be because they're overwhelmed, but sometimes that can just be there can be several reasons, but the one that really comes to me in this moment is, when you have been doing something a very long time and it feels comfortable. And actually, again, there's that fear piece around, can I be brave enough to try something new? Or you've gone down this one particular avenue because society expects it, your family expects it, or you expect something of yourself, and it's not aligning with your values anymore. So often there's this kind of, this stuck feeling that comes when you are not aligned with your values. And so, the journey might then be around, what would it take for you to get back on track and act from a place of alignment?
I love that you touched on values, because I think, again, it goes back to knowing yourself and knowing yourself well enough to recognize that you're out of sync because you're not following your values. And I think we're so bombarded in society by social media and everything else that it's so difficult to lose that sense of who you are and your values. Thank you. So in terms of spirituality, Tony, you've been talking a lot about it. And for me, my experience with coaching has been spirituality is almost parallel in coaching. So is this something that happens across the board, or is it dependent on a particular coach? Or are you expecting to touch on spirituality with any coach?
I don't know that every coach is open to it. Particularly the integral model that I use, and some other schools as well. Your spirituality is part of you. And if you're going to be holistic and bring all of you to the table, then your spirituality is definitely part of it. So no, I absolutely welcome people's spiritual parts of themselves to come, and it looks so different from person to person. So for some people that can be their religious beliefs, for some people it's a connection to nature, to service, to serving, or just something else in the universe. But whatever it is for you, I often think that's it's a beautiful part to weave into a coaching program. So again, when you're doing your homework about, if that's a part of you that's important, or you want space for, you can ask the coach, is this a space that we can go and see what their response is?
Thank you. Thank you so much. So in terms of coaching and self-help books, so I mean, for me, I think self-help books, I'm a fan of as cliched as that sounds. I'm really a fan of it. So why would I need a coach if I can find the answers in a self-help book?
Mm. Good question. And I mean, Flip, there are some brilliant books out there. I think, and yeah, I can also be one for reading and reading. So, and I know from myself that I can read and read and not do anything about it. So, what does it take to actually take that wisdom and integrate it into your life? And sometimes it's really helpful to have somebody with you on that journey. Now, if you've had some coaching already and these are the questions I need to ask myself, this is how I need to put something into action, then totally go for it. But actually, if you're just reading and not integrating, how useful is that reading? Or is it just taking on more and more knowledge without, there's knowing and there's being.
Yeah.
And so
no action steps, eh?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. That's really important. I agree with you because I've read many books, and the thing is, information overload is also something society is struggling with at the moment. Because at the click of a button, you can get a gazillion definitions on what a coach is. So it really is a challenge, and I think having a coach there to direct you, ask you the right questions, to be able to get you to focus your thinking as to where you're heading, which is important.
And can I add, I think that can also lead to overwhelm, because if you go onto social media, what you'll hear is, you must read this book, you must read this podcast, this book, this video, this whatever. 5 things that you must do, 10 things that you must do. Oh my gosh. And, and if you're a conscientious soul, which, many of us are, you kind of feel like you need to do all those things in order to grow. And actually, sometimes growth is about putting all of that down and kind of coming back to some form of presence with yourself and with others.
You're giving me goosebumps because I was watching this podcast the other day, and this doctor, I don't know if you know him, Dr. Chatterjee, and he was saying that exactly what you said in terms of information overload. People are so overwhelmed these days with everything, which diet to follow, what foods to eat, which podcasts to listen to, what drink to have, that essentially what we need to go back to is ourselves, where we have to make that decision and understanding what we need and actually following our intuition. So that was, you gave me goosebumps.
And it's so interesting when 2 messages kind of come to you in quick succession.
Exactly. Absolutely. Emotional intelligence, is that really important in coaching? It is so much of talk of emotional intelligence and how we navigate life these days. It's not just IQ, it's EQ as well. So in coaching, do you tap into that? Sometimes I think, Tony, that people are not aware of their own emotional intelligence. So that would come out in your coaching sessions. Am I right?
And, some people come and they're actually very in tune with their emotions. Some people, they're not. Some people suppress their emotions completely. And so, yes, that can often be the piece of, a piece of work that happens too, because there's wisdom in our emotions. Emotions are data. So what are they telling us? So, so it depends on the person, kind of how we kind of come at the angle of emotions, but they're really useful. Sometimes people kind of go into emotional spaces a bit too much, and so we kind of need to contain that a little bit. And many people actually, they give their emotions no time at all and won't feel them. They can even fear them. And so actually some of it can be, an emotion, if you actually really sit with it, can only last 90 seconds. And actually, most people are like, oh, I can just about manage that. But it can be terrifying to think that that emotion will go on and on. So sometimes it can be about, sitting and feeling those emotions. And then, having kind of tapped into the wisdom contained in those emotions, I guess there's also that piece around knowing how your impact on others. So kind of, and how emotions feeds into that, whether you have big emotional responses and the impact of that, or no response and the impact of that. So
absolutely.
There's a kind of a piece about what's going on inside you, and then maybe later about how that's impacting on others.
Thank you. So now that we discussed the different aspects of coaching, how do you measure success in coaching? So how do I know, okay, I'm ready now and I can stop?
So I guess kind of the definition of success would be defined by you, whoever's coming for coaching at the beginning. Okay. So it's not that the coach is going to go, well done, tick, you get an A and now you can go. You would talk about, right at the very beginning, you would talk about, well, how could life look for you? And how would you know that coaching was successful at the end? And so you would have to do the thinking of, okay, what that could look like for you. And often it's funny, when you have a program of, let's just say 6 or 12 sessions, it's funny, it's almost most of the time, the work kind of happens in that time. I don't know if it's like there's an inner clock or something, but like I've got these sessions and it needs to be sorted. So more often than not, I mean, the majority of the time, whatever it is resolved by the time, within the time that you've, contracted up front. So it's very much defined by the person. And I guess if I think about, when I'm thinking about, was that session successful, for example, people will often come with an issue, and often that issue isn't the real issue. That actually kind of, when you get underneath it, like, well, what is it about that that's important to you? And, well, what's important about that? And you kind of go down a few levels. There's often like a moment where you hit the real issue, and there's a kind of, I feel it in my gut, and there's kind of an, oh, that's what it's about. And so, and a moment of realization. So, that would be my check-in with myself. Did we get there? Did we really get to the heart of the issue? Would be my own check-in of whether it was successful.
And Oprah would say it's the aha moment.
Exactly.
If you come across somebody that's really challenging and is really resistant to all of your suggestions, how would you deal with that? I would imagine that would happen as well. That has happened.
Yeah, it does sometimes. I mean, look, the really, really, really resistant to change people don't come to coaching. But if people come for coaching and then that shows up, it's actually brilliant, because a coach is actually a mirror for what's going on in your life. And so whatever happens in the coaching space together is often what is happening in the person's life. And so if that comes up, that's brilliant material for us to work on. So I would share, like, I'm really noticing some resistance here. What's going on for you? And then you'd explore that, and often there's just beautiful insights underneath that conversation.
To unlock that resistance would be amazing. To be able to see. That's wonderful. We're getting towards the end. What, in terms of advice that you would give to pharmacists who are considering coaching, I mean, what before they take that leap of faith, what advice can you give them?
I think when you're ready for coaching, it'll just start to kind of tap on your door, and you'll just, you'll start to be aware of it. And so, I guess we spoke about earlier about putting feelers out, seeing who you come into contact with, doing your homework for meeting coaches. And, you could always just have a short program to kind of stick your toe in the water and see what it feels like. Actually, you asked earlier about cost, and I was actually just an idea that popped to me that, if that's something that's a struggle to you, you can always have group sessions. If there are 2, 3, 4 of you who are all struggling with the same issue, you can always go to a coach and say, would you group coach us around and we can explore this together? And that, might feel less threatening to kind of go in as a group and have people share it with you. And of course, then it's, more cost effective.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Yeah, thank you. Because from my experience, as I said earlier, it can be an expensive exercise. But I think, as you said, you have a defined goal that you want to achieve, and it has to be within a space of time. And you achieve that goal, and then you don't have to go back necessarily unless another crisis appears that you can't deal with. So in terms of sessions, does this happen on a weekly basis? What would be your best advice in terms of time? How often should it happen? Once a month, once a week? What would be the best scenario?
I typically see people once every 2 weeks, and then maybe at the end it can extend out to once a month. If it extends beyond once a month, then you often lose momentum. And so there's something about that rhythm of seeing each other regularly that really helps. You can see them once a week, but, I think you can still get benefits by seeing somebody, every 2 weeks, for example, which allows you to do the chain, the work in between. And often there's something to do in between there. A practice, reflecting on how you are in those moments or so on. So there's work, and often that's where the real magic happens, is the bits of work you do in between times.
Thank you, Toni. So if anybody wants to reach you, do you do online sessions? Can anybody contact you, or where would be the best platform to find anybody? But you must give me your details. Can I share your details with everybody?
Yes, by all means.
Okay, great.
By all means, yes.
I will do that. But if they're not in your area, or if they want to have a one-on-one session, which would be the best space to find a coach?
There were a couple of questions there. So yes, I do online sessions. You can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. That's great. So you can either, you can look up coaches, for example. You could go to the International Coaching Federation or the Commensa website and look up people there. You can always look for people in your, Google people in your local area, or look on LinkedIn, and there are lots of people around. And again, just get a feel for who you resonate with and have that chemistry conversation with a couple of people.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you so much. This has been so fantastic. I really appreciate the time you've taken. And hopefully lots of people are going to get into coaching or find the coach, should I say. That would be great. Whatever the reason you're considering a coach, Prof. Antonia or Toni shared some powerful insights into why coaching can be life-changing. Her passion and enthusiasm were contagious. And to sum it up, coaching should be a positive, forward-focused experience that empowers you to take ownership of your own growth. I hope this podcast has inspired you. Next step, take the leap of faith and find a coach that aligns with your journey. Thank you for listening to Pull in Perseverance. Stay motivated, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the podcast.